Social media addiction is becoming a bigger and bigger problem in society with the growth of social media, more users, more content being shared. The addiction is increasing too. In today's video, I am asking the question, can social media addiction impact your ability within your job role? And the very simple answer to that question is yes, absolutely. As with most forms of addiction, they are going to have some impact on our everyday life. And of course, we spend the vast majority of our everyday life working, doing our jobs, performing in our roles. And so, of course, as with all other addictions, it is going to have some impact. So let's look at the ways that social media addiction could be impacting employee productivity, output, and performance. Well, first of all, social media addiction is likely to impact sleep. Firstly, because those who are addicted to social media find it much harder to switch off at night, turn off their phones, and go to sleep at a reasonable time. They're more likely to get into bed and scroll on their phone and lose those sleep hours to looking at social media. And so the next day, of course, they are going to be sleep deprived, and this is going to continue and become a bigger problem. And you don't need me to tell you just how important sleep is for performance. Sleep is a really important factor, and the odd night isn't going to make a huge amount of difference. But if it is night after night after night, then that is going to have a really big impact on our ability to perform. And it's not just because we are spending time on our phone that we should be sleeping. It's that when we do put our phone down and we stop looking at social media, we've been feeding our brain with light that tells it to stay awake. We've also been feeding it with content that it's got to dissect and understand. So we're not giving it the ability to switch off. Instead, we're switching it on before we try to go to sleep. So the fact that sleep is so heavily correlated with addiction and social media, it shows that absolutely that's going to have a really big impact on workplace performance. The next way in which it is going to impact workplace performance is focus and attention. The more time we spend on social media, the more it impacts our ability to pay attention and focus on task. And that's not just because we're reaching for our phone and we want to look at social media, although, of course, that can be a big factor if we're busy working away and our brain is saying, go on social media, go on social media. And we'd keep being drawn to picking up our phone and looking at social media. That, of course, is one factor in this. But even if we work in a workplace where our phones have to be put in a locker all day, we don't have access to any social media during the day, it's still negatively impacting our ability to focus and pay attention in our role, because our brains are learning to only be able to focus and pay attention on very small pieces of content at once. And the more of that we do, the more we scroll and take on lots of different pieces of content, one after the other, the bigger the impact on our ability to focus and pay attention. And again, of course, the ability to focus and pay attention is going to have a big impact on our role. If we can't stay off on task, if we're procrastinating, if we find our mind wandering, if we start kind of doing things like checking emails every couple of minutes, there are so many ways that our focus and attention is drawn elsewhere naturally. But to then have our brains tell us to stop paying attention and to move on to something else in quick succession is not going to help us in our ability to perform within our role. Social media also detrimentally impacts our creativity as well, mainly because we're consuming so much that we're not leaving any room in our brain to be creative. Creativity often comes from periods of silence or places in which we can't consume at the same time. So, for example, in the shower, in the middle of the night, when we're out walking the dog. And yet those with social media addiction are spending so much time plugged in that they haven't got that time to be creative and to innovate. And they're also flooding their brain with information all the time that is really, overtaking our brain's ability to pull out the finer details and be creative with those finer details. So in terms of innovation in businesses, then social media addiction can have a really negative impact on that. And social media addiction can also have a negative impact on our mental health for numerous different reasons. So, firstly, the more content we consume, the more likely we are to compare ourselves to that content, to what we're seeing, to images, to other people's lives, to other businesses, etc. And that leads to lowering our self-esteem, making that comparison, going, I wish I looked like that, I wish my life was like that, I wish I had that car, why aren't I as successful as that person, why have they got more friends than me, lowers our self-esteem, which can have a really negative impact on our mental health. Plus, I think as well, you've got to really think about the time element of this as well. It's those who are addicted to social media will be likely spending hours and hours a day consuming on social media, and those hours and hours are taking us away from things that can actually bring joy to our life, like being present with our family, or doing joyful activities, or doing activities that that calm us and de-stress us, rather than something like scrolling on social media, which can increase stress. And on that note, what we're consuming can sometimes be really negative. It can invoke negative emotions. It could be really sad. It could make us really angry. It could make us fearful. It's not always positivity and light that we're seeing on social media. And the more negativity we consume, the more negativity it's going to give to us. And so that's going to have an impact on our mental health, which again is definitely going to impact our ability to perform. Because when we're not feeling fulfilled and joyful and happy, it is very difficult to get in a mindset of performance. And so it's really important that we consider that kind of connection both between social media addiction and mental health, but then also as employers, how is that going to impact our team in the workplace? And it's a really close link, and I think something that we need to think about more and more. And then finally, and probably the most obvious one, social media addiction in the workplace is not now always in the workplace, is it? Because so many people are working from home. And the problem is, when they're working from home, there is no one there looking at them, reaching for their phone, or having Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever their platform of choice is open at the same time as trying to get their job done. So, of course, that is going to impact their performance, because they're spending time on social media instead of spending time performing and getting the job done. So, in answer to the initial question we asked, does social media addiction impact employee performance? Then the answer is without a doubt, yes. So what do we do about it then? How do we do something as employers to make sure that it isn't impacting performance? Well, first of all, it is really important that you work with your employees on their addiction to social media rather than against them. So, for example, saying, that's it, we're banning all access to social media, we're banning you from having smartphones, etc., in the workplace. If you haven't done that before, it's going to lead to a lot of feelings of resentment, for example. So instead, that could be something you do down the line, but it's worth, first of all, having someone like me, a digital wellbeing coach, come into your organization and work with your teams in understanding what social media addiction looks like, why that could be having a detrimental impact on their life, but also their job role, and some steps they can take to steadily reduce their social media use so that it becomes a long-term habit that is broken, rather than something that can be stopped for a week and then they go back and start binging again. So it's definitely worth getting someone like me in to help you with that. And also, creating a really positive digital culture as an organization is hugely important too. And if you would like to find out more about creating a positive digital culture, then I will leave a link below detailing my next workshop, all about how to do that. So you can come along, find out more about it, and we will be discussing things like social media addiction in that session. So I'll pop the link below where you can find all the details and book your place on the next workshop. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think social media addiction has a detrimental impact on employee performance? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you again in a future video. Take care.